You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your healthcare? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their healthcare. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your healthcare, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your healthcare while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He made me crown not good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Good evening, everybody. It's Bill O'Reilly, and I'm here with my co-host Liz Feld. And you're listening to for immediate release. It is Monday, November 5th, 2018. And we're very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow is obviously a pretty big day. What do you think, Liz? What's going to happen?
Well, Billy, I'm rooting for you. First of all, let's just start with the most important race in the country, which is the governor's race in New York State. And you have done a masterful job with your candidate, Marc Molinaro. And the last couple of days, the press has been exceptional, and you're being rewarded for all of your strategy and your hard, campaigning and your everything, your ground game, your television, your editorial boards. And I was just looking at a poll right before you connected me that shows that you guys have gained significantly, and you're way ahead with independent voters.
Yeah, it's hard work has paid off. It's very tough because Andrew Cuomo has raised, as you know, $101 million in his 8 years as governor. And he's basically spent it all down now. I think he only has a couple million left. And Mark is quite an honest guy. He doesn't spend a lot of time raising money. And so he spent, maybe $1.5 million. And so the disparity is just huge. But Mark is just a tremendous candidate. And we watched, unlike in the rest of the country, the independents in New York are breaking for Mark the Republican. And that's a really, really good sign. It's a tough state. I mean, that said, it's more than 2-1 Democrat to Republican, and there is that wave out there. But we couldn't have possibly a better candidate. So he's definitely exceeded a lot of people's expectations. We'll see what happens. We'll find out. Tomorrow. Ultimately, the voters will decide, and we'll accept the results. But we're going in feeling very good. So thank you, Liz, for the kind words. I'll pass them to Mark as well.
Well, and I'd ask you if you think that what you're seeing here is unique to your race, or if you think there's anything else going on around the rest of the country here. I mean, obviously, Cuomo's running for a third term, which we know historically is a tough one, no matter what. But there are other dynamics at play, including the fact that Andrew Cuomo has made his entire campaign about Donald Trump.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz. I'm sorry.
Clearly was a mistake. If you just look at the response in the polls, it was a mistake. He certainly can't run on his record because New York State's such a mess, and all of his closest confidants are in jail or on their way to jail. He had to spend $100 million to lead frankly an unknown. Mark was not known at all around the state when you guys started a couple of months ago. So, is there anything going on here that you think will translate tomorrow to any other races?
I think we'll see. And if Mark wins or does exceptionally well, it will mean to me that voters are still available. Because New York is not, although it's Donald Trump's home state, it is not at all a friendly state to Donald Trump. He only got about 34 or 35% in the 2016 election here. His numbers are not good here, but it will mean that voters are still willing to choose a candidate based on that candidate and not based on what they think about the White House right now. There are a lot of factors involved, and I say this without hyperbole. New York is ranked the most corrupt state government in America. It is ranked the most expensive place to live in America. It has the highest property taxes in America, the highest overall taxes in America. It has the second worst business climate in America. the second highest energy costs in America. It's the worst place in America to retire, and it leads the nation in out migration, meaning people are fleeing New York for other states more than any other state. New York has lost 1 million residents in the past 8 years under Andrew Cuomo. And a lot of those, frankly, are Republicans from upstate New York. New York City is remains vibrant even during tough times, but upstate New York is falling behind the rest of the country in job growth, in so many different categories. So there are a lot of reasons, and in addition to that, Andrew Cuomo has spent about $52 billion giving corporate giveaways, taxpayer giveaways in tax breaks and cash grants to donors. And he's gotten, that $101 million back from donors. And so people are sick of it. People that know about it are sick about it. At the same time, again, New York is overwhelmingly a Democratic state. And, that wave that wants to come out there and punish the Republican Party for Donald Trump, its current leadership, is that's in the air also. So we'll see which one's going to prevail, or maybe they split the difference. But my hope is that New Yorkers vote the person and do election by election, and we'll find out. But yes, Liz, there are a lot of reasons for why this is happening. It's a really interesting dynamic, especially when you see independents breaking the other way in most other states. They're right now breaking towards the Democrats. But in New York, they're breaking towards the Republican for governor. Very interesting.
Well, with the medley, of information that you just laid out, it's no wonder that Cuomo can't run on a platform of 4 more years. So it's, 4 more years. What's worse than being 50th, 51st? In ranking in almost every single category that you just described. One of the things that I'm hearing over and over again, as I know you are, is that Republicans who are angry at Trump are saying that they will not vote for any more Republicans again, any candidates, until Trump is gone.
Yes.
And I can't subscribe. I never subscribe to that kind of thinking. I don't. I understand it and I respect it, but I do vote the candidate. But it's that way of thinking is certainly influencing the what we're seeing now, the projections for tomorrow, and how so many actually decent, good, well-qualified Republicans are not going to be reelected because people are mad at Trump.
No, that's absolutely right. And I know some Republicans who will not vote for a Republican until Trump is gone. And of course, many Democrats that were swing voters in New York. I mean, we do elect Republicans in New York. There was a stretch where we had Rudy Giuliani as mayor of New York City and George Pataki as governor of New York. Governor Pataki, by the way, was out with Mark this afternoon. He's never forgotten his roots, and he's never forgotten what it's like to be a first-time candidate. So he always shows up. He's really is pretty amazing that way. But there are people who will not split their ticket as a result of this. They're just going to vote Democrat down the line, and it really is unfortunate, Liz. That's it's an unfortunate thing, but it's where we are. The real concern, of course, which is we're not making news here, is suburban women. And suburban women well. You've been one. That's where a lot of the pain to Republicans is expected to come. Although in New York, that dynamic's been around for a little bit, so Republicans don't hold that many suburban seats. I don't think in New York there'll be. I don't think there's going to be any House races lost in New York. It's possible that there's a crazy wave and 2 or even 3 could happen. I don't think any. I think the Republicans hold every House seat in New York, in part because the suburban areas were already bad for Republicans, and the exurbs, beyond the suburbs, still have a lot of Second Amendment people. It's a little bit more rural and a little bit more Republican. Time will tell. I mean, maybe proved wrong tomorrow, but the suburbs are the killing ground, according to the experts.
And do you feel like, and we're going to have a very special guest join us in a minute or two. You and I have talked from the day we started the show about including a younger generation of voters and a younger generation of political operatives, to this conversation, because we those are the folks who are registering in record numbers. They're they're thinking or projecting that they're going to vote in record numbers, and we'll see tomorrow. Really, that will be the first big test of this. I mean, the energy of the last 2 years finally has a chance to be translated into an actual vote tomorrow. I do think for the first time. So, yeah.
I was thinking, typically younger voters don't turn out in midterm elections; they just turn out in presidentials. And I've seen stories on both sides saying that I saw one headline last week that younger voters were going to skip this election, and then another headline saying, younger voters are going to sway the election. So you just don't know. I mean, everybody's talking out of the side of their neck or whatever the expression is. But we'll see. And I'm glad that we're going to have Matthew on to talk about it, because he's really plugged in around the country. And speaking of around the country, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Tom and Allison in Florida, who are very loyal listeners. And they joined Sleepless in Seattle. Hello. And Yui in Hanoi that are great listeners of the show.
Hello.
Is that Matthew Feld?
Hey, Billy, how are you?
How are you?
Good. I guess I was patched right through. There you go.
Nice, you're in. So
yeah.
Liz and I are going to grill you now. Liz, why don't you go ahead and begin? We have a millennial.
Well, we talk politics around the house pretty often, and until it gets heated, and then we drop it. And then we switch to sports.
Yeah, I want to talk sports with Matt too. Yeah, exactly.
But Matthew is a veteran, actually, of the Romney campaign. And Billy, I know he worked with you actually on Joe Loda's mayor race in New York a couple of summers ago with your partner Jessica Proud. And Matthew does keep up certainly on electoral politics all around the country, but his sensibility and his level of engagement, I respect enormously, and he also is a data freak. So I think he can add some actually facts to our rambling here tonight about what we think we'll see tomorrow, and why we're going to see the results that we're going to see tomorrow.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? Could you start with say the Senate? Like, where do you think the Senate goes tomorrow? And do you have any races that people should be watching in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that the Republicans are extremely likely to hold on to the Senate. When President Obama won re-election in 2012, senators like Heidi Heitkamp, who are Democrats, who's a Democrat, of course, from North Dakota, they were really able to ride President Obama's re-election coattails, but they were elected in states that are traditionally Republican terrain. So senators like Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, Claire McCaskill in Missouri, states that are typically Republican and look like they will vote Republican this time around, are incredibly vulnerable. And that's why I think Republicans who would typically be facing an equally tough challenge in keeping the Senate as compared to the House are probably feeling pretty comfortable about their chances. Two Senate races or if you really, there's so many, but if you want to pick two or three, Dean Heller is a Republican incumbent in Nevada. Democrats have tried to knock him off multiple times, and it seems pretty, it's going to be a very close race, but I think Democrats are pretty confident in their ability to finally knock him off due to changing demographics. Youth turnout is way up there. My mother and I were watching a segment tonight about, registering to vote at UNLV. It's been going on for a year now. They've been incredibly successful in getting young people, getting college students to register to vote in Nevada. So, I think that is one place where Republicans could be, susceptible.
Plus the hotel unions, right? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Las Vegas,
Yep, Las Vegas, Reno. We're talking, that was a state that used to be reliably Republican, especially during the George W. Bush administration. That's a state that's gradually shifted despite, President Trump's really, outstanding night on election night in 2016. That was one state that Hillary Clinton still managed to, hold on to. That was a swing state. And then just, two other ones. The Texas Senate race has been talked about for months and months and months now. It's become kind of ground zero for all election discussion just because of the back and forth and the contrasting styles between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has been vulnerable for, it's been seen as an opportunity, but there's a big chance that Beto O'Rourke just can't get over the hump. He's raised over $70 million over the last year and a half, which is just unfathomable, for a Senate race. However, he's facing a lot of criticism because he never made kind of the willingness to reach across the aisle. He is someone who's hard in his stance, actually. He's called for President Trump's impeachment. He's called for Medicare for all, something that someone in a state like that, if you're a Democrat, it's not something you'd usually do. But his authenticity, his Obama-like persona he's getting these massive crowds, and he's kind of hoping for what Trump was hoping for 2 years ago, where the polls don't show that he's in a great position, but he has this momentum. He has this following. You see him speak at these rallies, and these people are really galvanized by him, and that's always a dangerous thing in years like this. And it's definitely something worth watching.
And Matthew, do you see any possible pickups for Republicans in the Senate? Like, do you think it stays even, or do you think we pick one up?
Well, I think North Dakota and Missouri are the two best chances. I think there's almost no question that the Republicans will pick up the North Dakota Senate seat. I think it's just about a done deal.
You know, I was so buried in New York stuff. Did McCaskill really run that ad saying, "I'm not one of those Democrats"?
Yeah, that's been kind of her thing over the last week. That's been her big thing the last week. She kind of did this thing where she was, of course, no on the Kavanaugh confirmation, and that got all the Republicans in the state up in arms. And now this last week, she's tried to become Trump's friend on immigration almost, and say that she's for extra border security. And so she's been kind of a flip-flopper big time in the last couple of weeks, and she's hoping it pays off, but I don't think it's going to. It's a race that's kind of, trended in the direction of Josh Hawley, who's the Attorney General in Missouri and is trying to unseat her.
Right.
Matthew, what are we going to expect to see out of Arizona? I know the Democrat running out there right now, Sinema, she's been pretty controversial, but, she, like what you just said about McCaskill and the border, Sinema has also said that she supports Trump's proposal to send 5,000 border troops down to stop.
Yeah, Arizona. Yeah, no, it's true. And Arizona is very similar to Texas in this state, and in the fact that it's a seat that Republicans have been kind of holding on to, but barely. But it's almost been like Charlie Brown's football for Democrats. Hillary Clinton swore that she could, win it in 2016. She really never came close. Jeff Flake was seen as someone who could have been vulnerable. So I think it's going to be very interesting on election night. I think it might be the closest Senate seat out of them all. Because, Kristen Sinema's got a huge foundation and she has a huge fundraising, background. She's got, she appeals to the diverse aspects of the state. But Martha McSally, when you're coming off, when you're looking at senators like Jeff Flake, John McCain, John Kyle, who are all Republican senators, she still has to be, in my opinion, the favorite there, despite the fact that, she might be down, 0.5% or 1% in the polls going into tomorrow.
Matthew, you just reminded me of the prevailing conversation in 2016 that Democrats were having, that things were so bad for Republicans in 2016 that the Democrats were now targeting Arizona. Do you remember that? It was
yes, absolutely.
Trump was going to lose so badly that they were putting resources into Arizona.
It's funny, it almost feels exactly the same way, but on the flip side. And the reason I say that is because at the time, all the political pundits were saying that Trump had no chance, and I was one of those people. I looked at it and I thought that there was no way
Me too.
Someone down the stretch. But when you go back and look at it, actually, the final week or two's data pointed to the fact that Trump would not be winning, but that the election was really tightening. And people were ignoring that. They really were. They were choosing to go with the conventional wisdom. Whereas I think the reverse side might be happening this time around, where seats like the Texas Senate race, the Nevada Senate race, the Arizona Senate race have really tightened, when originally it looked like Republicans would be able to win by 5, 6, or 7 points. So I would really not be surprised. I would be pretty shocked if the Democrats were able to take the Senate, but I would not be surprised to see Beto O'Rourke win in Texas, or I would not be surprised to see Kristen Sinema win in Arizona. I don't think those are that outlandish when you're talking about two parties who are fired up, when you're talking about new young voters who are more excited than ever to vote, and you're seeing early vote numbers that are through the roof. Those are not good predictors of who will win, but it's good predictors that people are fired up to go and vote. And when you have record turnout, the outcomes are really unpredictable.
And Matthew, how about that the House? Speaking of Reno and Vegas, okay, so you're at the poker table, you got 100 chips in front of you, and someone says the bet is whether the Republicans lose the House or not. How many chips do you put out there?
Oh, the bet, if I have 100, I'd probably put in about 85 to 90 right now.
Yeah.
And it's just because, and again, it's just like my faith in the Republicans holding on to the Senate. It's just because of the math. when you look at so many seats that, where Republicans have incumbents, but in districts that Hillary Clinton won. But again, I think, you look at Virginia 5th, Virginia 7th, Dana Rohrabaugh in California 48th. The Maine 2nd congressional district, which people forgot Trump won because Maine splits their electoral votes. And Trump won the Maine 2nd congressional district, and he won that electoral vote. Can Republicans still find a way to win that seat tomorrow? So I think the big problem, I would not be surprised if the Democrats only ended up with a 1 or 2 House seat majority or a 40-seat majority. But I think it's very unlikely when you look at the special elections that you've taken place over the last 2 years. I think it's going to be very, as tough as it is for Democrats going to be to win the Senate, I think it's going to be equally as tough for the Republicans to hold on to the House.
Yeah. The number. I mean, my guess, and half of it is putting your finger in the air, was that the Democrats would. I guess they need 23. My guess was they were going to take 31, and Cook reports now saying 45. If you see that, at least on Drudge, they're predicting 45, which I was surprised to see. I mean, is that just the independents breaking late?
Yeah, and the big thing is that, the last week of polling has really shown kind of a surge for Democrats. And I don't mean some massive surge, but when every House race looks like it's going to come down to 1 or 2 points, a 2-point surge is all you need to kind of totally change the landscape of the race. And there are so many close races. And I don't know if that's independents. In all honesty, and I really do believe this, I think you are going to see a lot of new registered voters in this election cycle, similar to 2008, similar to 2014. I think that you are going to see this unprecedented amount of first-time registered college voters in Illinois. 70% of the people that go to the University of Chicago have registered to vote in the last year. I just think that you are going to see a huge between 18 and 29. And again, I don't know whether they're going to go 50-50. I don't know if it's going to be 55-45 one way or the other. But I think that issues like healthcare and immigration that benefit, both parties' platforms have really gotten young people excited and ready to go out and vote.
I'll tell you, I had a daughter that went to University of Chicago. I'll take 50-50. I don't think it's going to be that good. Hey, Liz, did you see the registration numbers in New York, the new registrants? There was, so for the last quarter, listen to this, Matthew. It's going to put hair on the back of your neck. For the last quarter, the Democrats registered 147,000 new voters. The independents, people registering as no party, 99,000. The Republican Party, 1,400.
-2. 1,000.
Yeah, 144,000 Democrats and 147,000 Democrats and 1,400 Republicans. That's the new registrant trend. I think maybe you're talking about. I hadn't even thought that was all millennials or substantially millennials, but maybe that's what you're talking about, Matthew. Maybe there's a lot of younger voters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something we go back to a couple of years ago. One of the reasons that Democrats were sold that Hillary Clinton was going to win was because of the new young voters that Obama had energized that were going to be all Democrats, and these new minority voters that were going to be all Democrats. And it didn't turn out in 2016. But I think those main problems for both parties still exist. Republicans are trying to fight over how to get young voters into the party. It's just something that they're going to have to be able to do. And the big thing is they need to be able to sell how their ideas of free enterprise and individual freedom translate into issues that young people care about. The 3 biggest issues that young people say they care about over and over and over again are healthcare, climate change, and education. And the Republicans should be able to turn those 3 issues and make them focal points, again, of the pillars that they believe in: individual freedom, free enterprise, small business. But Democrats have just done a much better job at branding themselves to those issues over the last 10 years. And it's something that Republicans really need to do a better job at when it comes to messaging.
I didn't think about healthcare till I was 50. It's amazing that pops up. Go ahead, Liz. Sorry.
I'm still eating peanuts for dinner. But that's
That's La Verdad.
So I have 2 questions, Matthew. Number one is why I can agree with you a lot about poor messaging. Why don't young people care about jobs and the economy? Is that something that they take for granted? I mean, because they're living in what are very good economic times right now. And, listen, Trump didn't campaign on the economy, and he could have taken credit for it. And instead he went dark, and is focused on immigration. But if jobs are not a number one or number two or number three priority for new voters, that's shocking. And I don't think it just has to do with messaging. That could be a whole culture change. And secondly, I just wonder how many of these voters, these first-time voters now who are so energized, are only energized to vote against Trump, and how, that will change as we go into 2020. I mean, it's so much of these voters are just anti-Trump. We see it in the marches. We see it in the, the response to Parkland and the failure of the federal government to do anything about guns. But at some point, people are not going to vote, just keep voting against incumbents. They're going to have to be for a candidate.
Yeah, and I think, the Harvard University, Youth Institute did a poll. They do a poll every, 2 years to register youth excitement, and 40% of people between the ages of 18 and 29 said they were definitely going to vote. That number had never been above 20% ever in the history of their 30-year polling. Mm-hmm. And now 40% of people between 18 and 29 said they're definitely going to vote. And that number, out of those 40%, 54% said they're going to vote Democrats and 43% said they're going to vote Republicans. So that's not a huge margin, 11%, when you consider that Hillary won young voters by 20 points in 2016. And so, to me, the jobs issue, I think it's a couple of things. One, you touched on it. One, the economy has done incredibly well now for about 7 years. And people feel fairly, I don't know if they feel secure, but it's just not considered a top issue when you're not going through an economic downfall or an economic recession. The second thing is student loans, and student loans are a huge thing. And I just don't think that students are focusing on jobs once they're out of college when they don't even know if they're going to be able to pay for college. And I think that's a huge issue. And rightly or wrongly, I think most college students think Democrats do a better job, whether the policies are right or not, and I personally disagree with most of them. They do a better job of at least talking about those issues than Republicans do. And my friends at Providence College, most of my friends are fortunate. They're from pretty well-off families, have, well-off. You're from well neighborhoods and they have, affluent parents, but they still talk about all the time the ridiculousness of college costs, of tuition, books. And it's by far a top issue for students. And I think that's what actually where Democrats are able to become so popular amongst young voters is their willingness to talk about education so much, and their willingness to at least propose a plan, to make college more affordable, again, whether it's sensible or not.
Right. Of course, you can't tell the truth that it's government spending and,
exactly.
the open spigot that drove up the costs,
Well, no, exactly.
Yeah. Matthew, are you watching the Georgia Senate race?
Yeah, the Georgia governor's race.
I'm sorry, excuse me, the Georgia governor's race, exactly. The Colbert race.
Yeah, this actually might be like the most interesting race to watch tomorrow, in my opinion.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Because you have, the Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams, who's trying to become the first African-American female governor of the state, and then you've got Brian Kemp, who's the Secretary of State, who's the Republican, and he's favored, but not by much. It's you're looking at a 1 to 1.5 point race right now, and it's a state. And again, it's very similar to Texas and Georgia and Arizona in the aspect where Democrats are really going to rely on changing demographics in terms of in this case, it's all about African American turnout. And it's been a very hotly contested race. There have been a lot of charges thrown back and forth. Democrats have accused Republicans of voter fraud. Republicans have accused Democrats of election fraud and pretty much cyber hacking of voting booths and voting places. And so it has gotten a very hotly contested race. But the reason it's so interesting is because Georgia has a 50% rule, and that is if both candidates don't receive a majority of the vote, over 50%, then it goes to a runoff in the beginning of December. So this is a race that probably won't even end tomorrow. This is probably a race that's going to go on for another month, and it's definitely something where if you're the Democrat and you're Stacey Abrams and you're already considered probably a slight underdog just because of Georgia's political background, you can't wait. If you're not going to win tomorrow, you can't wait for a runoff where all the Democratic money can come in behind you.
Yeah. And Kemp in the last poll that I saw, Kemp was up about 2 or 3. Is that?
Yeah.
where most polls are right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kemp's definitely the favorite, and my guess is he'll win tonight, or win tomorrow, excuse me. But the big thing is whether he can get above
At
that
50.
50% threshold.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yep.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I mean, Georgia's one of a couple states. Louisiana does that also. That was a big thing with Mary Landrieu a couple of years ago in the Louisiana Senate race. And that, that's going to be a big thing Republicans are looking for. They're going to be looking for that. And the only other race I'd say that people have not talked about enough, and I don't understand really why, is the Mississippi Senate race. I think that race is going to be incredibly fascinating. It's another similar race in the fact if you don't get over 50% of the vote, then it goes to a runoff. The top two candidates, there's currently 4 candidates running, and the top 2 vote getters go to a runoff later in November. And currently, the hope for Republicans was that the top 2 candidates would both be Republicans, so no matter what, a Republican would win the seat. But a Democrat by the name of Mike Espy has moved into second place in the polls, and so that would create a very interesting dynamic where, control of the Senate would not even be decided tomorrow. It would be decided in 3 or 4 weeks if it became, that close of a race.
And you're right. I really don't hear anyone talking about that. What I would think that the runoff would favor Republicans only because the wave factor is not going to be as much in play for a special. But without looking at it too closely, that's my gut take. Is that Republicans would do better in December than they would this election day.
No, absolutely. I would 100% agree with you. And again, this has the circumstances of that race, as we all know, were so different. But I would just say that Democrats would probably go into a similar strategy with a similar hope that they did, of course, in Doug Jones' special election race, last year. But I would agree. I think Republicans would be feeling pretty good if they were at 50, and that was the 51 that they needed, down the road in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So Matthew, Billy, can we just talk about 2 other races, Matt, that I don't think get enough attention? One is the New Jersey race. I mean, the fact that Bob Menendez is still not only competitive, but I guess leading, and it would be an upset if Bob Hugin wins. I mean, given that Menendez stood trial for corruption.
Yes. Yeah, no problems there.
In addition to a lot of other charges that have come out against him, and Bob Hugin has run a tremendous race.
He has.
Why isn't there more talk about that, Matthew? Do you just think there's just no chance a Republican's going to win there statewide because of the circumstances in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think Republicans have unfortunately are still battling the Chris Christie governorship. There's a lot of evidence that points that way, that Republicans have really struggled since the end of that for a variety of notable reasons. But, Bob Menendez, being able to somehow withstand this political storm is really quite unprecedented. I mean, that scandal you're talking about was a year ago now, and it's still, for some reason, it's kind of been wiped away from the news. It really makes no sense that he's been able to survive. And, I think Menendez in this case is going to be a big benefactor of just the national environment. Again, no one knows how much it's going to favor Democrats, if it might even slightly favor Republicans. But in order for a Republican to win in New Jersey, especially a Senate seat, you can't have the political environment that is, going on right now. And I think that's why you've seen Menendez kind of expand his lead over the last couple of weeks. It's just Democrats kind of coming home and kind of sucking up the fact that they have to vote for him again, for a probable number 6 years, despite how bad of a candidate he is.
Right, which shows you how bad of a candidate he is. I mean, really, with the charges, the underage hooker charges and the rest of the stuff, and it shows you also what a really good campaign Hugin has run. You're absolutely right, Liz. Same with Connecticut with Stefanowski and Lamont, where Republicans have no business doing well in Connecticut this year, and the Republicans actually winning in the polls right now for governor.
Yeah, well, that place is bankrupt, as we know, and there are more and more people fleeing the state of Connecticut than have fled New York.
Taxes. Yep.
Yeah, which is shocking. You drive around these beautiful towns in Fairfield County as one example, and every other house is on the market. They're way upside down on their pension liabilities. They are city after city is bankrupt. So Stefanowski comes in as really just a straight up, economics business guy. He was a GE guy actually, and he's coming across as sober and adult-like. So let's hope he pulls that out, just for the people who live in Connecticut. Matt,
yeah.
Sorry, good.
No, you go ahead.
Well, in the other race, and the other dynamic is Florida. And we've talked about this, how, Gillum and DeSantis and Nelson and Scott, both those races, critically important.
Yeah, huge. And I think you're actually going to see some in Florida where you kind of were just talking about in Connecticut. And what I mean by that is that I think you're going to see a lot of split ticket voting. Chris Murphy is going to win the Senate seat in Connecticut without question by 20 to 25 points. And Bob Stefanowski needs people to be willing to vote for Chris Murphy, but then vote for him on the Republican side in Connecticut. And he's probably going to need, hundreds of thousands of people to do that. And then in Florida, I think it's really not unreasonable to expect a similar case. I would be pretty surprised if DeSantis won. It's just, again, not because of anything other than the fact that it just seems like the momentum has kind of gone in Gillum's way the last couple of weeks. Those debates I thought were kind of brutal for DeSantis, and I'm not even talking about positions, but we all know how important debates are from just a presentation standpoint. And I thought Gillum came across as much more personable, much more ability to kind of connect with the audience, connect with the people at home, even though DeSantis is kind of hoping for what Trump got in Florida in 2016. Huge turnout in exurbs, those kind of bigger suburbs almost. And there's definitely a chance that the way that Florida is kind of drawn up politically, particularly in the Panhandle around the Tallahassee area, that there's a chance that DeSantis could upset. But I think there's a much better chance that Rick Scott wins the Senate seat. And I wouldn't even bank on that, but I think there's a far better chance that Rick Scott wins the Senate seat just because of his more crossover appeal for Democrats than there is that DeSantis wins the governorship. I just think that Gillum's kind of been able to, connect and really energize the Democratic base there, but not, I would still, again, I think there'd be enough middle-of-the-road independents, slightly leaning Democratic voters to vote for Rick Scott, where you could see a Democrat win the governor's race and a Republican win the Senate race.
Matthew, what's your take on how the Democrats have dealt with Trump? Have they overplayed that hand?
Yeah, I think the problem for them is they're still trying to figure out how to deal with him. When you don't have a leader of when you don't have a leader of your party, in terms of an elected leader, I think you run into this problem where you just don't know how to deal with him in terms of, do we call for his impeachment? Because that works in some parts of the country. It doesn't work in every part of the country. And it kind of goes back to the Beto O'Rourke thing, right? I mean, he calls for Trump's impeachment in Texas. That might work in a place like California 48th, or maybe even in the Wisconsin governor's race. But in Texas, which has a Republican leaning, that's a pretty dangerous political ploy to make. And so I think Democrats are trying to figure out what works, and they're going to need to figure out what works in 2020 because Trump's an incumbent. He's going to have a huge base of followers, barring some catastrophe tomorrow night in where the Republicans lose the Senate and the House and get throttled, which almost seems impossible right now. He's going to be the nominee again, and so they're going to have to find someone that is able to kind of create this blueprint to how to handle him. I don't think tuning him out altogether is the right way to work. In fact, if I were the Democrats, I would find a way to get one signature bill done with him. It probably has to be infrastructure, but then be able to turn around and say, we were able to even compromise with this guy, and so we can lead the country and compromise with anybody. And I don't know if that's what they're going to do. I don't know if that's what their polls say that they should do. But in terms of a general election strategy for 2020, if someone like a Kamala Harris, who is so far to the left, was able to show that even one time she sat with Donald Trump, I think that would be a hugely compelling ad to play and story to tell when you're trying to cross over to the other side when the general election comes around in a couple of years.
Well, Matthew, I think that's absolutely right. Good for you. Do you think, though, that some of the Democrats running now are being punished for being somewhat supportive of Trump or supportive at different times? And I'll use Donnelly as an example. I mean, Manchin is safe and he's going to win by 10 points. And he was pretty tight with Trump until, a couple months ago. But what about Donnelly in Indiana?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think Donnelly's going to win. I think Donnelly's gotten a much more favorable showing the last couple of weeks. Again, I think he's someone who looked like he was in trouble and now is kind of rebounded. And, I think it's a tough rope. I think it's a much harder kind of thing to straddle, fence to walk on if you're a representative, because if you're a Democratic rep and you're campaigning every 2 years, there's no question right now that you're campaigning that you're going to resist everything Trump does. So you'd be going back on your voters if in a couple of months you're now sitting with coffee and having coffee with him for some infrastructure bill. So that I kind of understand. For senators, I think it's much more difficult. And I think there are some senators that might be being punished, and I think Claire McCaskill actually might be one of them. And I think that there are, and I think that, it's kind of, you have to kind of toe the line. What's politically optimal and what do I actually believe in? And I think it's something that I think that Democrats are really struggling with, because the young voters that really don't like Trump, we've seen that they have the ability, at least in a primary, to knock off any incumbent that they want. And I think that's something that a lot of people, are really nervous about when they see, these, on both sides, on both wings, these kind of primary opponents surging and being able to win and knock off what were considered to be safe incumbencies.
Yeah. Matthew, do you have a sense on Scott Walker, where Scott Walker is? Is he stabilized, or do you think he's still very much in jeopardy? He was my pick for president, my first one, and he exited quickly, but he's
not the only one. You were not the only one. I know plenty of people who thought Scott Walker was going to win. I thought, it was like between him and Marco Rubio, it was like, 50-50 for most people for most of the election cycle. Scott Walker has. Scott Walker, you want to talk about, who the Democrats think is Teflon. I mean, they've gone after this guy, I think it's now 4 times. They had the recall election where they swore that they were going to win.
It was the storming of the Winter Palace. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God. It's kind of incredible, right? I mean, Walker's not even that popular in Wisconsin, yet he's been able to build this massive get-out-the-vote infrastructure. He's been able, between the right-to-work law that he was able to pass. That is a signature
which is amazing.
Of course.
Yeah. In Wisconsin.
Incredible.
In Wisconsin. You know what I mean?
Incredible. It really is incredible. But I will say, I think it's a really close race. I think it's a really dead heat. But I do think Tony Evers is going to win tomorrow. I think Scott Walker's luck is kind of running out. He's consistently polled, even when he's been up one or tied. He hasn't been above 47% since April, which is just terrible for an incumbent when you're running for re-election. And, I think, that if you've really been stuck, he's been a lot in the 44, 43 range consistently, even when he's tied or barely trailing. And, we've seen with presidential incumbents, that's not a comfortable territory to be in. Something that Ted Cruz.
You're not picking up on the side that you've been there that long. Yep.
Yeah, and something for, it's very similar to Ted Cruz in the fact that even when Ted Cruz has only had a small lead, Cruz has consistently been in the 50 to 51 range, which means that even if he lost every other vote, he'd still win. And it doesn't matter whether you win by 0.01 or by 10. It just seems that Walker has just dug himself too big of a hole that he would literally have to not only have everything go right for him on a day that's probably not going to be the best for Republicans, but he would probably need to outperform every other kind of factor going his way. But again, Democrats have come after him 3 times and he's been able to win. So who knows with that guy? He might really be Teflon.
If anybody can go into a phone booth and come out with a cape, it's Scott Walker. No question.
That's right.
Yes.
Can I ask you, Matthew, one thing that's not come up tonight at all with young voters and their thinking is the Supreme Court. And actually, obviously, also the Mueller probe and all which is not as prominent in the media over the last month or two. But so the Mueller probe and the Russia investigation, and then the Supreme Court, are those non-factors with young voters?
Well, I think the Supreme Court nomination process was unquestionably important among suburban women. I think there's no question that had a huge impact in the same respect that I thought it allowed Republicans to bring their base home. I thought it had a huge impact in sharpening the gender gap between Democrats and Republicans going into Election Day. The latest CNN poll tonight out has women preferring preferring women by almost 15 points, which is just huge going into an election where Republicans have the edge among males by a single point. And that's been a gender gap that's existed for a while now, but I think it only sharpened and kind of hardened and solidified itself with the Supreme Court hearings. Among younger voters, no, I don't think it has a huge effect. I think people are more, I think young voters are more focused on the issues that could have ramifications due to the Supreme Court nominee, like abortion, like gay rights, like transgender rights, like gun rights, than the nominees themselves. In terms of the Russia probe, I've said for months now, unless it's something comes down that is actually legally troublesome for Trump, where he would actually face an indictment, voters don't care. And I don't mean to say that, and I shouldn't say that as a blank statement. But if you're going to go ask a voter on the street what their top 5 issues are, what their top 10 issues are, their issue might be Trump, but it's not going to be the Russia investigation. There is no one that is going out to vote because of that. And I just have never thought, I think that's a damaging thing on his potential legacy as a president, but I don't think that has any impact on how people go out and vote tomorrow.
Yeah, I think after the election, it's going to come up very, very quickly. My sense and the sense of people I've talked to in Washington is that Mueller's ready to roll out some more cards, and he'll wait till after Tuesday, obviously. But you're right; it vanished as an issue. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think something to watch here, and I read this really interesting story. I think it was on The Atlantic a couple of weeks ago about how Robert Mueller is a very private person. He always has been. He's never been someone who has shared his investigations very publicly, and that there is a very real chance that while the surrounding indictments, for the people around Donald Trump might come out publicly over the next couple of weeks, it would be very anti-Robert Mueller at the end of the day to come out with this 100 pages long public reveal of what they found against Donald Trump, barring some sort of force by Congress to make it public, which seems incredibly unlikely unless Democrats really want to go down that path. There's a very good chance that at the end of the day that people never see what exactly Mueller investigated, if there really was anything at the end of the day that he found as it concerned, particularly, specifically Trump, not his associates, but specifically him.
Yeah. Lynn, sorry, I cut you off before.
No, you didn't at all. I just think it's remarkable. We were talking about candidate after candidate, Andrew Cuomo, Andrew Gillum, Bob Menendez, and there are plenty of Republicans who have had some corruption charge against them or against their associates. There was a time when even the whiff of a scandal like this would disqualify from office. The bar is so low now. I guess it's a conviction yourself, because then you can't serve anymore. I mean, even then, some of these guys have to be dragged out in handcuffs. It says a lot about the kinds of people we're willing to vote for and what matters to us and what we value here in our elected officials. Because these guys, they don't leave on their own, and they continue to be, voted into office. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. But Matthew, I guess it's not a big factor.
No, well, I think that, and again, I don't know if it's all Trump, because people, obviously there are plenty of people before him, as you mentioned, that we're talking about going years and years and years, that have kind of resembled this kind of scandal candidate that is able to still win. But I always felt that Trump was kind of the tipping point in terms of the rules were broken. The rules are over, because we have just gotten to a point with a news cycle that is so fast, that is so furious, that it is impossible for people to be able to digest all the information that pertains to candidates, that they just look past it and they say, and not completely, that's unfair. There are plenty of scandal-ridden candidates that have gone down, of course, over the last year and a half. From Roy Moore, Roy Moore, of course, tops the list. So that's not completely fair, I don't think. But I agree, there's just so much news, there's so much information, there's so much stuff, there's so much, all right, so what, who cares, that so many people are kind of willing to, they either don't hear about it, they don't know about it, they don't care about it, and they're just more focused on who the person is as a politician.
Tell me when he's convicted, Matthew. I think it's totally fair, and I think you hit it in the nose. In fact, I've been ranting about this for the last few years, is that because I work on the news side of campaigns, is that the news cycle moves so quickly that you can endure any news cycle. So you can be under a cloud. In some cases, you can even be indicted. You have to be convicted now to really go down. because you can wait out a news cycle. If it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days max, you're on to the next thing. Even school shootings and like major events are 3 days max, and then you're on to the next news cycle.
Absolutely, and I think the big thing is too, right, in the past with events like this, and again with events like Roy Moore or other, whether it be Andrew Gillum, Andrew Cuomo, the party would desert you. They wouldn't want to be associated with you because they would be worried that it was going to bring down your electoral prospects as well. And there's just no evidence anymore that that's a problem, that it doesn't matter who you associate yourself with. You all fall under the party umbrella. And that to me is the big thing, right? I mean, people would not be so worried about running for office with backgrounds like this if they were worried about losing their party fundraising base or their party voting base or their organizational structure. But there's no worry about that anymore. Parties don't abandon candidates for anything anymore outside of electoral probabilities. So that to me is the big thing, is that candidates feel like they can do whatever they want, they can get whatever they want, and that there are no rules because, as you said, really, the news cycle is so fast that people forget things like they never happened. And that to me is the big thing, is that candidates, because of the team they play for, because of the jersey they wear for, are always going to have that organizational party infrastructure with them. And it's too bad because, as you said, Mom, it just doesn't matter.
Matthew, where are you with how Trump pivoted to the caravan rather than, there were two ads that his campaign team prepared. The first one was a very positive Reagan-esque one. I saw them both at One America. I was in their studios in New York on Friday, I guess, or Thursday. And the first one was very good and powerful as a plus. Economy moving, things moving, positive Republican, and then I think it was a 50-50. Then I hit on the Democrats, protesting and the rest of it as a contrast piece. But Trump apparently hated that, and he went out with the immigration piece, which I actually thought was very effective. What was your take from millennials on that one, playing the caravan card? Good move, bad move, indifferent? Yeah,
it was so funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Texas, and he's been a pretty big Ted Cruz supporter for a while now. He moved from Boston, to Texas a couple of months ago. He went to school down there, and I asked him about it. I said, I made a joke. I said, when I ever run for public office, my slogan's just going to be caravan. And he goes, well, quite frankly, just based on where I am, I wish Trump would just shut up about the whole thing. And and I think it's an issue that can play really well. And actually, funny enough, in a state like North Dakota, where you're trying to shore up Republicans against a very vulnerable Democrat, maybe in a state like Missouri, a similar thing. But I'm going to be very interested to see how much it energized those minority voters in Arizona, Nevada, behind Beto O'Rourke in Texas, in Southern California, because while it may have also certainly intensified Republican voters, if it allowed Democrats to turn out more minority voters than they did in 2014 or at a higher percentage than they did in 2016, it will have totally backfired. And while we already know this is a disadvantage that Republicans have faced for a number of years now, that there are just unfortunately more registered Democrats than Republicans. And so if more Democrats vote, then that's going to be a serious problem for Republicans electorally. So I'm going to be very interested to see whether or not this has had a very interesting effect where it fires up Republican voters, but it's really fired up, as you said, those young voters, those minority voters, Hispanic voters in Texas, Arizona, and Nevada, which have been not Republican, but have voted 35 to 40% Republican in most elections, whether that number drastically drops because Trump shows this path. And I think it's going to be a big takeaway one way or the other after tomorrow.
Yep.
Well, God knows that none of these candidates can run on an immigration platform that has some substance to it. Because they had no time to put that together in the last 10 years, 20 years.
I found the choice that President Trump made on, I find it really illuminating. There's a piece in the New York Times tonight, I think, about him basically instructing his team to shut off the positive ad and to go with the caravan ad, which again, I thought was very well done, very effective. It was a tough ad, no question. But it's interesting that then rather than take the self-aggrandizement of the positive ad, talking about all the things, Trump actually went for the turmoil again, like tactically. I think it's a really interesting insight into his thinking. and into how he sees things. He's obviously been successful politically where many, including me, thought that he wouldn't be. He's got that instinct, and he went, let's stir it up again right before the midterms rather than let's pat ourselves on the back. It was an interesting play.
Well, I don't think he's comfortable being sunny. It's so ironic that his Make America Great slogan, which is so positive in a way, it's actually pretty negative, but it's so positive to some people. It does not fit his approach in any other way. His style, as you just said, is it's always, he's so much more comfortable fighting, having a boogeyman, which is actually maybe why having a Democratic Congress will be good for House. Will
be helpful.
It's going to fire him up to do try to do some big things or do more things by executive order. We'll see how that goes. But I don't think people would have responded in a way that he wanted or needed if he did the positive thing, which is too bad.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Matthew, do you think that Trump is better off politically in 2020 having Nancy Pelosi as speaker? Someone to lay things off on?
Yeah, I don't know. Do I think he's better politically? I think there's going to have to be an attitude adjustment at least behind closed doors. He's going to have to be more reconciliatory, because as we saw with, as you saw in 2014 is kind of a bad example because 2014 was a midterm election, but the Obama and the Democrats had kind of shut off the Republican Party, while the Republican Party have kind of done the same thing in turn. Remember, there was the big, kind of supposed to be omnibus bill in 2013. There was supposed to be this huge spending bill, this agreement, and Republicans kind of pulled away, Democrats kind of pulled away, and Republicans were able to kind of use that as a galvanizing force in 2014, that the Democrats were kind of this party that, did not meet with middle America. And so I don't know if this time around Democrats would take a similar strategy and kind of totally shut him out and kind of just focus, solely on trying to impeach him and trying to get his tax returns. And so I think it would be a unique opportunity for Trump to be able to kind of say that I'm being obstructed against, I can't get anything done, I can't get the wall, I can't get my infrastructure bill because people like Nancy Pelosi won't let me do them. On the other hand, if Democrats have a good night tomorrow, their voters are going to be very energized, and they're going to say to themselves, if we come out to the polls, if we mobilize, we can take this guy down in 2020. And I think that's going to be the big thing because if Republicans have a good night tomorrow, it doesn't even have to be that they lose the House. Let's say they only lose it by 3 seats. Let's say the Democrats only get 25 seats and only have a 2-seat majority, and Republicans pick up a seat or two in the Senate. That overall would not be a good night for Democrats when you consider what they were hoping for coming into the midterms after the 2016 election. But if Democrats do have a big night, if they pick up 40 seats, if they somehow take the Senate, if they somehow win the Texas Senate seat and the Arizona Senate seat and the Nevada Senate seat, they're going to be able to say, we have our blueprint, we know what works, we have to mobilize, energize, keep our young voters interested, get the minority base out, and we have to nominate a candidate who is either a woman or a minority, Hispanic, African American. We now have our blueprint to take him down. So I think it's huge. I think there's going to be a big difference tomorrow between Democrats barely taking the House and them having a huge night in terms of Trump's 2020 prospects.
Good take. Yep.
I think that.
Matthew Feld, thank you so much for being on, and thank you all for tuning in again. We get to talk all night.
Billy, talk to you again.
I'm talking about America, sweet America. God done shed his grace on thee.